I'll never forget that. The woods stopped being just trees and dirt roads to me. That place was the kind where cell service disappears without warning, where once the sun goes down, you start questioning your own presence in the world. At the time, I was traveling alone for work, and I ended up taking a route that barely showed up on any map and that no one would have recommended if I'd bothered to ask. But circumstances didn't give me much choice, and turning back wasn't an option. The road narrowed the farther I went, shrinking from pavement to cracked asphalt and then to packed dirt. Dense forest pressed in on both sides, the trees so thick they seemed to swallow what little light remained in the sky. It felt like the woods were closing ranks behind me, sealing off the way I'd come. At first, everything seemed normal enough. The air was cool, almost refreshing, and there was a strange calm in being so far from everything. No houses, no other cars, no distant highway noise. Just me, my vehicle, and the steady hum of the engine. That calm didn't last. After a while, an uncomfortable heaviness settled in my chest. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like I was being watched. Not in a dramatic way, not like something was about to jump out at me, but more like a quiet, patient attention. Every time I glanced into the side mirrors or through the windshield, there was nothing there but endless trees and shadows. Still, the feeling refused to go away. I tried to distract myself by focusing on the road, but it was getting harder to see. The canopy overhead blocked out most of the moonlight, and my headlights barely seemed to penetrate the darkness ahead. The beams cut a narrow tunnel through the forest, and everything beyond that tunnel felt unreal, like it didn't exist until I reached it. I told myself I was just tired, that long drives had a way of messing with your head. Then the engine sputtered. It was brief, just a hiccup, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten. I eased off the gas and listened carefully. The engine smoothed out again, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea of breaking down out there, miles from anything recognizable, suddenly felt very real. I kept driving, but my grip on the steering wheel tightened, and I found myself checking the fuel gauge more than necessary. Eventually, I came across a small clearing where the trees pulled back just enough to reveal an old dirt turnout. It looked like it might have once been used by logging trucks, but now it was nothing more than an uneven patch of ground with tire ruts filled with dark water. I debated stopping to rest for a moment, but something about that open space unsettled me more than the enclosed road. It felt exposed, like stepping into the middle of a room where you don't know who else might be there. So I kept going. That's when I noticed the smell. At first, I thought it was coming from my vehicle, maybe something overheating, but as I cracked the window slightly, the scent became clearer. It was earthy and rotten, like wet leaves and decay, mixed with something sharper that made my nose sting. It wasn't the normal smell of a forest. It felt wrong, intrusive, like it didn't belong there. A few minutes later, the road dipped sharply and crossed a narrow wooden bridge. The planks creaked loudly under the weight of my vehicle, the sound echoing through the trees. I slowed to a crawl, half expecting the bridge to give out beneath me. As I reached the middle, I glanced down through the gaps between the boards and saw nothing but darkness below. No water, no reflection, just a black void that swallowed the light. Once I was across, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's when I saw him. At the edge of my headlights, just where the light faded into shadow, there was a figure standing near the trees. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The vehicle skidded straightly on the dirt before coming to a stop. I leaned forward, squinting into the darkness, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a man, tall and thin, standing unnaturally still. He wasn't waving or signaling for help. He wasn't moving at all. He just stood there, partially hidden by the trees, his head tilted slightly to one side, as if he were studying me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he was looking directly at me. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to leave, but before I could react, the engine cut out completely. The headlights flickered once, then went dark, plunging everything into pitch blackness. The sudden silence was deafening. No engine, no radio, nothing but the faint sound of my own breathing. In the darkness, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, getting closer. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking, already knowing it wouldn't be of any use out there. The footsteps stopped just short of my vehicle, and for a moment, everything was still. Then there was a soft knock on the driver's side window, so gentle it sent a chill straight down my spine. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, and that's when I realized that whatever was standing outside my car didn't want help at all. The knock came again, a little firmer this time, right next to my ear. I stayed frozen, my hands hovering uselessly near the steering wheel. My mind raced through every bad decision that had led me to that moment, every warning I'd ignored. Outside, the forest was completely silent, as if even the insects were holding their breath. Whoever stood there didn't speak. He didn't scrape his nails against the glass or try the door handle. He just waited, like he knew time was on his side. After what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to move. My fingers shook as I twisted the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died again. The sound felt painfully loud in the quiet, and I was sure whoever was outside heard it. I tried again. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered weakly before fading out. I was stuck. The shape outside shifted, and I heard slow footsteps moving along the side of my vehicle. The crunch of boots on dirt sounded deliberate, measured. He wasn't circling me like an animal. He was inspecting, taking his time. When the footsteps stopped near the rear, my chest tightened. I had no idea what he was doing back there, and that uncertainty was worse than seeing him. Then the footsteps returned, stopping right by my window again. This time, his face was closer. I could make out more details now, illuminated faintly by the moonlight filtering through the trees. His skin looked pale, almost gray, stretched too tightly over sharp features. His mouth was slightly open, and his lips were cracked as if he hadn't had water in a long time. But what unsettled me most was his expression. There was no anger, no desperation, just a flat, empty calm. He leaned closer to the glass, and I saw his breath fog the window. "Open it," he said quietly. His voice was wrong. It sounded strained, like he hadn't used it in a while, each word dragged out and uneven. I shook my head without thinking, my throat too tight to form words. He watched me for a moment, then straightened up slowly. I thought he might leave. I hoped he would. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was wide and stiff, like he was copying something he'd seen before but didn't quite understand. He stepped back into the darkness, and for a few seconds, I couldn't see him at all. My heart hammered in my ears as I strained to listen for any movement. When nothing happened, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. Then, something slammed into the side of my vehicle. The impact rocked the car, and I cried out despite myself. Whatever hit it did so again, harder this time, metal groaning under the force. I caught a glimpse of him in the side mirror as he moved away, lifting a large rock from the ground. He brought it down against the rear window with a dull crack, spiderwebs of glass spreading instantly. Panic took over. I kicked at the door, yanking the handle, but it wouldn't open. The frame must have warped when the engine died or when he hit the car. I scrambled into the passenger seat, trying that door too. It opened an inch before sticking fast. I shoved my shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. Another crash shattered the rear window completely. Cold air rushed in, carrying that rotten forest smell with it. I heard him breathing now, louder, faster. He climbed partially into the back, shards of glass crunching under his weight. I could see his silhouette clearly as he reached forward, his hands grasping blindly through the darkness. I screamed and scrambled back toward the front, my foot catching on something and sending me sprawling. I felt his fingers brush my leg, cold and surprisingly strong. Adrenaline surged through me, and I kicked wildly, connecting with something solid. He grunted and withdrew, slipping back out of the vehicle. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. I lunged for the driver's seat and slammed my hand down on the horn. The sound exploded into the night, harsh and unnatural. I held it down, tears streaming down my face, my heart threatening to burst. The noise seemed to disorient him. I saw him stumble back, hands clamped over his ears, his expression twisting into something ugly. For the first time, he looked angry. He shouted something I couldn't understand, his voice breaking into a harsh, guttural sound that didn't sound like any language I knew. Then, just as suddenly, he stopped. He turned his head sharply, staring off into the forest, as if he'd heard something else. His posture changed, all that aggression draining away. Without another glance at me, he backed into the trees and vanished. I stayed there, leaning on the horn, long after he was gone. My body shook uncontrollably, every nerve on fire. Eventually, the horn died with a weak click as the battery gave out completely. The silence returned, heavier than before. I didn't dare move. I sat there in the dark, listening for footsteps, for breathing, for any sign that he might come back. Minutes stretched into hours. Sometime later, I saw headlights in the distance, cutting through the trees like a miracle. I forced myself to wave, shouting hoarsely until the sound hurt my throat. A battered pickup truck pulled up beside me, and a man climbed out, his face etched with concern as he took in the shattered windows and my state. He helped me out of the vehicle and insisted I sit in his truck. As we drove away, I kept looking back at the road, half expecting to see that pale face watching us from the trees. I told him what happened, stumbling over my words, but he didn't seem surprised. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're lucky," he said finally. "Most people don't stop when they see him, and the ones who do don't usually get away." I asked him who he was, but the man just shook his head. "That road's not meant to be used anymore," he said. "Some places are better left alone." He dropped me off at the edge of town and left without another word. I never saw him again, and I never went back to that road. Even now, years later, whenever I think of deep woods or empty roads, I remember that smile pressed against the glass. And I know there are places in this world where you're never as alone as you think. Necessary. Those rules sounded reasonable enough when they were explained to me in a small office with fluorescent lights and coffee brewing in the corner. They sounded a lot less comforting once I was actually out there. The base camp sat at the very edge of civilization. Beyond it, there was nothing but miles and miles of dense jungle, thick with vines, towering trees, and shadows that never quite seemed to move the way you expected them to. During the day, it was almost beautiful. Sunlight filtered down through the canopy in broken beams, birds called out to one another, and the air buzzed with life. But even then, there was a constant sense that the forest was watching, listening, waiting. Most of the crew avoided talking about it, but you could tell they felt it too. I'd been there for just over a week when things started to feel wrong. It began with small stuff. Tools left out overnight would be found moved the next morning. Footprints appeared near the perimeter of camp that didn't match anyone's boots. At first, we blamed animals, then locals passing through. No one wanted to jump to conclusions. Out there, paranoia was just another hazard of the job. One evening, just before sunset, my supervisor asked me to check a set of markers about a mile from camp. Normally, no one went out alone that late, but we were behind schedule and he insisted it would be quick. I grabbed my gear, a flashlight and a radio, and headed down the narrow trail that led into the trees. As I walked, the sounds of camp faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of insects and the occasional snap of branches shifting in the wind. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. By the time I reached the markers, the light was already starting to fade. I worked quickly, double-checking measurements and jotting down notes, all the while feeling an increasing pressure in my chest. It felt like the air itself was heavier, harder to breathe. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd catch sight of someone standing just beyond the trees. Every time, there was nothing. When I finished, I turned back toward camp and froze. The trail looked different. It wasn't drastically altered, not at first glance, but something was off. The bend that should have been there seemed to stretch on longer than it should have. Landmarks I remembered were missing, replaced by unfamiliar clusters of trees. I told myself I was tired, that low light was playing tricks on me. Still, unease crept in as I started walking. After 10 minutes, I realized I should have been back by now. I stopped and checked my radio, calling out to camp. Static answered me, sharp and grating. I tried again, adjusting the dial, but there was nothing but that same dead noise. My phone was useless too, no signal, not even enough to show the time. The forest seemed to press closer, the shadows deepening as night settled in. I picked up my pace, trying not to panic. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't loud, but they were distinct, pacing me just off the trail. I stopped abruptly, my heart pounding. The footsteps stopped too. For a moment, we were both still. Then I took a step forward. So did whatever was following me. I turned sharply, swinging my flashlight toward the sound, but the beam only revealed trees and undergrowth. "Hello?" I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. I walked faster, then broke into a jog. The footsteps kept up effortlessly, always just out of sight. My breathing grew ragged, and sweat trickled down my back despite the cooling air. The rational part of my mind screamed that it was probably an animal, maybe curious, maybe territorial. But animals didn't match your pace like that. Animals didn't stop when you stopped. The trail suddenly opened into a small clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood an old wooden structure, half collapsed and choked with vines. It looked like a shack, maybe something left behind decades ago. I knew for a fact there shouldn't be any buildings out there. We'd gone over the maps again and again. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer. The air around the shack was unnaturally still, and the smell hit me at once. Rot, mildew, and something else beneath it, something sour and metallic. My flashlight beam trembled as it swept across the warped boards. Scratches covered the wood, deep grooves that looked like they'd been made by hands, not tools. Behind me, the footsteps stopped. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I did, I'd see something I wouldn't be able to unsee. Instead, I stood there, staring at that ruined shack, listening to my own heartbeat thunder in my ears. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Then a voice spoke, low and close, right behind me. "You're not supposed to be here." My blood ran cold. I spun around, flashlight cutting wildly through the darkness, but there was no one there. The clearing was empty, the trees standing still like silent witnesses. The voice hadn't echoed, hadn't carried the way sound usually does in the open. It had been right at my ear, intimate, deliberate. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the light. "Who's there?" I asked, my throat dry. No response came, but the feeling of being watched intensified, pressing down on me until it felt hard to stand upright. I backed away from the shack, every step slow and careful, afraid that one wrong move would provoke something. The beam of my flashlight flickered across the ground, and that was when I noticed the footprints. They weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. Bare footprints, too large to be a child's, too narrow to be most adults, pressed deep into the soft earth. They circled the shack, overlapping each other again and again like someone had been pacing there for a long time. None of them led away from the clearing. They just stopped. A sudden crack echoed from the trees to my left, close enough that I flinched. Something moved in the brush, low and fast. I didn't wait to see what it was. Panic finally took over and I ran. I bolted down the trail, or what I hoped was the trail, branches whipping at my arms and face. The forest seemed to twist around me, paths splitting where I didn't remember them, roots grabbing at my boots like hands. Behind me I could hear movement again, not just footsteps now, but something heavier, more purposeful. Whatever it wasn't struggling to keep up. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, fear drowning out exhaustion. I shouted for help, my voice breaking as it vanished into the trees. No one answered. The jungle swallowed the sound without a trace. Just when I thought I couldn't keep going, a faint glow appeared ahead, warm and steady. Camp lights. I stumbled into the clearing at the edge of base camp, nearly collapsing as familiar shapes came into view. The noise hit me all at once, generators humming, people talking, metal clanking. It was jarring after the oppressive silence of the forest. I turned around, scanning the tree line, but whatever had followed me was gone. A couple of crew members rushed over, asking what the hell had happened to me. I tried to explain, but the words tangled together, sounding ridiculous even to my own ears. A shack that wasn't on the map, footprints that went nowhere, a voice in the dark. They exchanged looks, the kind that said more than they wanted to admit. My supervisor pulled me aside later that night. He didn't scold me for being late or wandering off. Instead, he asked me quietly where I'd gone. When I described the clearing and the structure, his face drained of color. He told me there were stories about old illegal settlements deeper in the jungle, places abandoned after things went bad. People disappeared, equipment was found destroyed, search teams came back shaken if they came back at all. Next time, he said, his voice tight, you call it in and you turn around, no matter what. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound outside my tent made me jolt awake, convinced I'd hear that voice again. Somewhere beyond the lights of camp, the jungle stretched on endlessly, dark and patient. And deep down, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was out there had let me leave. I was part of a small documentary crew filming wildlife deep in a jungle most people only knew as a green patch on a map. There were no villages nearby, no roads, no real trails, just thick vegetation and the constant noise of insects and birds. We were supposed to be there for 2 weeks, camping near a river and hiking out each morning with local guides. From the beginning, they warned us not to wander off alone and never to stay out after dark. They didn't say why. They didn't have to. Something in their eyes made it clear those rules weren't suggestions. For the first few days, nothing strange happened. It was exhausting but beautiful work. The jungle felt alive in a way I'd never experienced before, like it was breathing around us. At night, though, things changed. The sounds never stopped. Sometimes, lying in my tent, I could swear I heard footsteps just beyond the firelight, slow and deliberate. Whenever I mentioned it, one of the guides would quietly add more wood to the fire and tell us to stay inside our tents. On the 5th night, one of our crew members, a guy named Eric, didn't come back before sunset. He'd gone out earlier with a camera to capture shots of the river upstream. When the light started fading and he still wasn't back, the mood in camp shifted instantly. The guides spoke rapidly to each other in their language, their voices tense. One of them told us Eric should have been back hours ago. No one wanted to say it out loud, but we all felt it. Something was wrong. We called out his name, first casually, then louder, our voices echoing uselessly into the trees. There was no answer. Against the guide's advice, we decided to look for him. We grabbed flashlights and followed the river path, moving slowly, scanning the ground for footprints. The jungle at night felt completely different, tighter somehow, like it was closing in around us. The beam of my flashlight barely seemed to cut through the darkness. About half an hour in, we found Eric's camera lying on the ground near the riverbank. It was smashed, the lens cracked, as if it had been thrown hard against a rock. That's when panic truly set in. Eric was careful with his gear. He wouldn't just drop it and walk away. One of the guides froze, pointing toward the mud near the water. There were footprints, but they didn't look right. They were human-shaped, but the toes stretched unnaturally long, pressed deep into the earth, as if whoever made them was far heavier than they should have been. We heard a sound then, coming deeper in the jungle. It wasn't a scream, not exactly. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a human voice without fully understanding how. The guide closest to me whispered something under his breath and told us to turn back, now. But before we could move, the sound came again, clearer this time. It said Eric's name. That broke something in me. I wanted to believe it was him, injured and calling for help, but every instinct I had was screaming that it wasn't. The voice was wrong, flat, unemotional, like it was repeating something it had heard before. One of the guides grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and dragged me backward. We retreated quickly, almost running, not daring to look behind us. When we reached camp, the guides immediately extinguished most of the lights, leaving only a small fire burning. They told us in broken English that whatever was out there was not Eric anymore. They said the jungle takes people sometimes, and when it doesn't always let them go cleanly. I wanted to argue, to demand we go back out with more people, but the look on their faces stopped me. They were terrified. That night was the longest of my life. From inside my tent, I heard movement circling the camp, slow footsteps. Occasionally, that same voice drifted through the darkness, calling different names now, some of them belonging to people sitting just a few feet away from me. No one answered. No one moved. The fire crackled, and beyond its weak glow, the jungle watched in silence. Just before dawn, the sounds stopped. The forest returned to its normal chorus as if nothing had happened. When the sun rose, we found marks in the dirt around camp, those same elongated footprints everywhere, but none leading away. Eric was never found. The authorities blamed an accident, said he must have fallen into the river and been carried away, but they never explained the camera or the voice, or why every guide refused to ever return to that area again. We left the jungle early. I haven't been back since. Even now, years later, sometimes when I'm alone at night, I hear someone say my name in that same flat, hollow tone. And every time, I'm reminded that there are places in this world where you're not supposed to go, because something else is already there, waiting to learn how you sound.
But they never sat right with me, not once, because accidents don't call your name in the dark. For weeks after returning home, I barely slept. Every night, just as I was about to drift off, I'd hear it again, that voice, always calm, always wrong. Sometimes it said my name. Other times it said nothing at all, just breathed softly, like someone standing too close behind you. I started leaving lights on, sleeping with the TV running, anything to drown out the silence. Silence had become the enemy. I tried reaching out to the guides. Only one of them answered my messages. He didn't want to talk much, but he did tell me something that made my blood run cold. He said their people believed certain parts of the jungle weren't empty, even when they looked that way. They believed something lived there that didn't hunt with teeth or claws, but with patience. It listened, it learned, and once it learned you, it didn't forget. I asked him if it followed people out of the jungle. There was a long pause before he replied. His message was short. Sometimes. Not long after that, strange things started happening in my apartment. Small things at first. I'd come home to find objects moved slightly from where I'd left them. A chair turned at an odd angle, a door not fully closed. I blamed stress, exhaustion, my mind still stuck in that place. Until one night, I found muddy footprints on my kitchen floor. They were faint, like they dried quickly, but I could see them clearly. Long toes, deep impressions, exactly like the ones by the river. I stood there staring at them, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I lived alone. I hadn't been anywhere near mud. I didn't call the police. I don't know why. Some instinct told me that wouldn't help. That night, I heard the voice again, not from outside, but from inside my apartment. It came from the hallway, low and careful, like it was practicing. "It's okay," it said, using Eric's voice. "We're safe now." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every part of me wanted to run, but fear had rooted me to the spot. The footsteps came closer, slow and deliberate, just outside my bedroom door. I squeezed my eyes shut, silently begging whatever it was to leave. After what felt like hours, the footsteps retreated. By morning, the footprints were gone. I quit my job not long after that, sold most of my things, moved cities, then states. I kept telling myself distance would solve it, that whatever had attached itself to me would lose interest. For a while, it seemed to work. Months passed without incidents. I started sleeping again, started believing I'd escaped. Then I heard my name at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I turned, expecting to see a stranger, maybe someone who recognized me. There was no one there, just an empty stretch of road and forest beyond it. That same hollow feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't tied to one place. It never had been. I understand something now that I didn't back then. The jungle didn't take Eric because he wandered too far. It took him because he listened, because he answered when he shouldn't have. And whatever learned his voice, learned all of ours too. It doesn't rush. It waits until you're tired, until you're alone, until you start to doubt your own senses. If you ever find yourself deep in the jungle or anywhere far from people and you hear someone call your name, don't answer. Don't even turn around, because some things don't want to hurt you. They want to replace you.